The Big Bang happened when the universe was first created. We'll fast forward through this because people are still debating whether this resulted from a concrete idea or just a happy accident. Instead, we'll begin with the first idea that most can agree with. Namely, that it would be kind of nice to leave the ocean and crawl up upon dry land. It doesn't look as if our ancestor is ready to make the leap just yet. Let's get back to him a little later. What is it that drives us to develop ourselves, to turn things upside down and constantly make a mess of them? Maybe the answer lies in the basic needs that everyone experiences. Like hunger, for example. Getting something in our stomachs has always driven us into the most extreme situations. Fear is another feeling that can really motivate us. Sometimes it is simply the need to show off that has fueled some of mankind's most ambitious projects. In 1961, Kennedy said that the Americans would be landing on the moon before the end of the decade, so that had to be accomplished in order to avoid looking ridiculous. Without the space program, we wouldn't have ceramic hot plates, pressure-relieving mattresses, or satellites. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, the drive to reproduce. Some would say that the first transatlantic telephone cable was a natural technological development in the wake of the Second World War. But then again, it could be seen as an absolute necessity for the returning soldiers. While they were abroad liberating Europe, they had in fact met a bunch of lovely girls. And of course, they wanted very much to stay in touch with them. The world's oldest photograph from 1827 was of a street scene taken by Joseph Niepce, who had simply pointed his homemade camera out the window. Baser minds have a definite opinion as to what the world's second oldest picture portrays. In any event, it can be argued that passion plays a major role in our quest for new ideas. In fact, you could boil it all down to two things: the survival of the species and human passion. If we aren't passionately devoted to the things we do, we cannot ensure the survival of the species. And if we don't have our passion to be devoted to, then there really isn't any point to the species surviving. This forms a kind of dynamic wheel that has kept us going since. Inventive individuals have often had to take up the fight against myths, pig-headed people, and naysayers, who, at best, laughed at new ideas. And in the worst cases, rewarded them with a tour of the torture chamber, followed by a speedy execution. History's first woman scientist was called Hypatia of Alexandria. She is quoted as saying, "Insist on your right to think for yourself, for even thinking wrong is better than not thinking at all." Hypatia was accused of practicing witchcraft, after which a bunch of monks cut her into pieces with seashells and burned her. The Italian astronomer and teacher of astrology, Cecco d'Ascoli, suggested in a burst of frivolity that there might be people living on the other side of the world. The Catholic Church was very saddened to hear that kind of nonsense and burned him at the stake in 1327. So the next time your friends laugh at your ideas, or worse, remember that it may be just because you are right. It is definitely possible to make history without ever even lifting a screwdriver. It is in fact often dreamers, philosophers, and science fiction authors who have inspired the rest of the world to get cracking. When Jules Verne wrote From the Earth to the Moon in 1857, the world had no idea how close to future reality the book would turn out to be. Creative people have foreseen many of the things we now take for granted. For example, television, the internet, pocket calculators, microwave ovens, chess-playing computers, credit cards, diving suits, robots, lie detectors, airships, GPS, air-to-ground missiles, and laser beams. But it isn't always technology and gadgets that change our world. Philosophers spend their lives reflecting upon all kinds of things in the hope of reaching the truth about our existence. In 1637, the French philosopher René Descartes pointed out that common sense seems to be the most evenly distributed ability among people. That ideal led to his famous quotation, "I think, therefore I am." That is probably the clearest definition of the sense of freedom we modern people take for granted. It is important to keep in mind that almost all good ideas have an evil twin or a destructive side. For example, can we allow ourselves to call nuclear energy a greater invention than the soup plate? Some people would say, yes, absolutely. However, the citizens of Chernobyl would possibly vote for the plate. It isn't easy to make a top 10 list of the best ideas in human history. Some of the usual suspects are fire, held on suspicion of arson and making manufacturing possible. The wheel, suspected of revolutionizing transportation. Cave drawings, suspected of being the world's first media. Electricity, wanted for distribution of energy. The printing press, one of the ringleaders behind the Enlightenment and the dissemination of knowledge to the masses. The theory of evolution, previously convicted for claiming that humans are related to monkeys. Radio waves, notorious for enabling us to communicate over great distances. The theory of relativity, so ingenious that very few people understand it. Gene technology, suspected of being the key to our entire existence. The future has never been closer than it is right now. Global communication has enabled the exchange of all kinds of information throughout the world, both essential and unessential. It is highly likely that in the future, your car will not run on gasoline, or even roads for that matter. When we sit down and try to imagine the future, we are in a way already in the process of creating it. There is no doubt that a single individual can and has changed the world many times. But usually, it is not until you begin to share your ideas with other people that things really begin to happen. In the future, do we send little nano devices into human bodies in order to operate on them from within? How should we use intelligent clothing? What form of energy should drive future transportation? Is world conflict and terrorism a technological or a philosophical challenge? Does a good steak have to be made from a cow? How do we deal with climate change and global warming? The future holds an unlimited number of questions and surely just as many solutions. Remember that those who put the first pieces in place shape the future. In fact, it all begins right now, if we can just get this little guy to take the very first step.